I'm Indy Neidell, and this is another World War II on location special and part of our road trip to France, 1940. There is a popular belief that France's defeat in the German invasion in 1940 was caused by an inferior army or inferior equipment or a retreat in the face of an overwhelmingly superior enemy. But a large part of the blame for France's defeat was caused by willful politicians and command failure. Okay, so where are we, Richard?
Well, we're on block 2 of Maginot Line Ouvrage la Ferté.
It is underneath us.
La Ferté is a petit ouvrage, one of 5 ouvrages intended to be built for the new front in the mid-30s. The probable reason to attack this ouvrage was for the propaganda benefit of capturing a Maginot Line ouvrage in the first week of the combat. German High Command was so happy with this, they allocated something like up to 240 artillery pieces for the attack. Which
Just this
little ouvrage
not
of
a
2
city.
blocks.
It's not Leningrad.
That's right. These are anti-tank rails which were put in position by the German army immediately after the armistice, because this was used for propaganda purposes to show how the Germans had defeated the Maginot Line. And there were visitors, both soldiers and officers, all the way through the Second World War, and it's one of the most photographed Maginot Line ouvrages. So, in effect, the first tourists here were German soldiers.
German soldiers. What actually happened to the Frenchmen in here?
Well, this is the sad part of the story. All 107 men died.
All of them?
Every man died. So, explaining it. The Germans, the mechanised units, left Germany morning of the 10th. It took them the 10th, the 11th, the 12th, and the beginning of the 13th for them to move from Germany to the east to the far horizon, which is Sedan. On the 13th of May, the 2nd, 1st and 10th Panzer Divisions with Infantry Regiment Grossdeutschland attacked at Sedan. They broke through across the river. Following the mechanised units, the 71st German 71st Infantry Division marched, and on the 14th arrived at the town of Carignan, which is the town, not the little village below us, but the town.
Town there, okay.
So that's to say that the mechanised units were not going significantly faster than infantry marching. When the 71st Infantry Division arrived at Carignan, General Hunziger, who was the commander from Sedan to the other side of this village, called Villy, ordered the withdrawal from the Maginot Line from the other side of this village all the way to Sedan on the night of the 14th, 15th of May. Because it was occupied primarily by Regiment Infantry de Fortress, they had no transport. So they had to abandon all their heavy equipment and most of their ammunition, and they withdrew back into the wooded hills behind us. The morning of the 15th of May, the commander of the German 71st Infantry Division did his attack across the river Cher. They were in the valley of the Cher. Artillery bombardment, attacked across the river, no French resistance, because the Maginot Line had been abandoned under the orders of General Hunziger. So on advancing up and capturing the village of Villy, holding the high ground behind, there's the river to the east. It meant the ouvrage was isolated. The original plan had been for 10 minutes Stuka attack on this block, 30 minutes of artillery bombardment by up to 240 artillery pieces. While that's going on, the German combat engineers would work as close as they could to the edge of the bombardment. Then German 88 direct fire weapons would fire across the valley at this cloche, and you could see some hits on the cloche. The idea being to blind the ouvrage. While the 88s were firing, the German combat engineers would creep as close to the craters, as close to the actual block as possible. When they were in position, they'd fire a flare pistol, Very pistol. The 88s would stop, they ran up, and they placed charges on the other side of the cloche. And you can see to the left where they've attached the 40 kilos of explosive, and when they set that off, that lifted the turret up a metre and it dropped back approximately in the position you see it now. and that's why you see the turret disabled like this.
Had Hunziker not withdrawn his men, would it have been as easy to destroy this?
Oh no, if the French army has spent 10 years building the Maginot Line here, and there's the usual casemates, there's all the blockhouses that would normally be there, there are observation posts. Had it been manned, it should have been able to resist a German infantry division attack for, it's debatable, we don't know how long, but it should have been able to resist it, yes. Originally, the ouvrage was intended to have 3 blocks. Only 2 blocks were built. This plan indicates, top right, that block 1 should have had 2 levels, and that block 2 should have had 2 levels. But when we go inside, we will see that block 1 does indeed have 2 levels, but block 1, only 1 level was constructed, which has contributed to why the ouvrage fell.
Why was it such a disaster so quickly?
So what happened was, there is no separation of function. This is a combat area, it's a cloche, it fires. That's where the men sleep. There are 50 men in this block.
Wow.
There's no separation between the men sleeping, living down below protected, and the combat area where the fighting is. So when there were the explosive charges dropped down from the cloche above, the explosive charges destroyed this wall. This hole, this gaping hole where there should have been a wall with the concrete on the floor, this is not a structural wall. This wall is only here to keep this part in overpressure, so that any gases are pushed out. So when there were explosions here, this wall just disintegrated, and in fact you can see how it must have injured some of the men lying on the beds, and straight away there were explosions, there's fire, because the fuel required for the motors was just stacked all over the place, because there was no place to store it underground. So it just went catastrophically wrong in seconds or minutes.
Now, the Germans couldn't have known that this one wasn't set, so it was just luck that they picked this
It was
one.
kind of bad luck, yeah. The Germans didn't know, no. The men had to abandon the block and go down into the gallery, those that were not injured or dead. You can see the effects of the blast from the explosions that's deformed the wall. When the attack was repeated by the Germans in Block 1, again they had to all go down, those that were not injured or dead, into the gallery. There's only a gallery, kitchen and infirmary, and there's not fresh air supplied to the gallery. The Germans say they found most bodies in the French word is the aigu, it's the drain. It's like a long gallery, 75-metre gallery, which then goes into the drainage, the siphons. And the reason they would have found French soldiers there is because it's 75 metres long, there's a volume of fresh air until that's used up. So gradually, as more and more explosions, more and more fires, there was less and less oxygen, and they died through lack of oxygen and noxious gases. After the armistice, the local teacher asked the Germans if he could disinter the bodies that the Germans had buried. The Germans said yes. He disinterred the bodies, found about 80-odd bodies, tried to identify those that he could. They could not identify the commander of the ouvrage, Lieutenant Bourguignon. So all through the war, there were rumours that Bourguignon handed the fort over to the Germans. After the war, Bourguignon's son did everything he could to try and find out what happened. So he put messages, he put letters, adverts, did everything he could in German military magazines, newspapers, whatever. And it wasn't until 1973 he got a reply from a German soldier who said he was here with the penal units that had buried the French bodies. And he said, yes, we buried 80-odd there. And yes, we buried another bunch here.
Okay.
And so Bourguignon's son got permission from the French state to disinter this second group of soldiers, and they found 18 bodies, one of which was his father. So that's when his father was identified as being a hero who had died with his men, and he had Légion d'honneur, etc. And that's what that memorial there is for.
All right, that's all for today. Once again, thank you very much, Richard Tucker.
My pleasure.
As always, it is our pleasure to have you here showing us around, and I hope you guys enjoyed that. Now, you can find the link to his website below, and check him out on TripAdvisor, so whenever you're in this part of France, or southern Belgium, or any of the Benelux countries, you can come and check this out, and he'll show you around, and it'll be absolutely amazing. And please, support us on Patreon so we can make more trips like this in the future. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.